All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Again, thanks for joining us. And we are really excited to share more information with all of you this afternoon about what is laid out in Minnesota's new Farm to Kids strategic plan. And we'll also share a little bit about how it will be used to advance farm to school and early care in Minnesota. Before we get started, please be aware that the MDA is recording this session. So under state law, the recording of this public session will be available to anyone who asks to see it. It will also be posted on the MDA's YouTube channel and our website. So you are welcome to keep your camera off during this webinar. And we also ask that you remain muted during the webinar to ensure that everyone can hear. And when we get to Q&A section at the end, you will have the option to unmute if you'd like to verbally ask your question. So my name is Kate Siebold, and I'm the Farm to Institution Coordinator at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And I'm joined today by my colleague and co-presenter, Jamie Anderson, who's the Farm to School and Early Care Consultant for the Minnesota Department of Education. So you'll be hearing from the two of us today, though many other partners were part of developing this plan. We invite you to introduce yourself in the chat by sharing your name, your organization and role, or any affiliation that you'd like to share. And you can also share if there's a reason that you chose to be here today. In terms of what you can expect for the next hour, we will begin by sharing background on the Farm to Kids strategic plan, including what prompted the plan, how it was developed, and the purpose that it seeks to fill. And then majority of the time will be spent giving you an overview of what's laid out in that plan, including a high-level presentation on the priorities, goals, and strategies that have been identified for strengthening and advancing farm to school and early care in Minnesota. And if we stay on schedule, we should have time for Q&A before we wrap up. So some background on this plan and more broadly, farm to school and early care in Minnesota. We are very fortunate to have a really strong network of partners in our state who've been working together for many years to promote and support farm to school and early care in Minnesota. Many, though not all of these partners, work together through the Minnesota Farm to School Leadership Team, which formed in 2011, and the Minnesota Farm to Early Care Advisory Group, which formed in 2014. So after nearly a decade of working together and accomplishing a lot of wins and progress for farm to school and early care in our state, several partners in these two groups started to see an opportunity to refocus our work and identify a clearer strategic direction for how we would be working together moving forward, since a lot can change in a decade, and we wanted to be thoughtful about where we go from here. So one area in particular that we saw as a need was to think about how to build greater alignment and connection between farm to school and farm to early care efforts in our state. So in 2023, the MDA applied for and received a USDA Patrick Leahy Farm to School grant to support the development of Minnesota's first Farm to Kids strategic plan, with Farm to Kids being a term that references or kind of connects farm to school and farm to early care efforts. So the purpose of this plan is to provide a vision and roadmap for how we as partners and alongside communities can work together to expand local procurement and agriculture education in K-12 schools and early care settings around the state over the next 5 years. So this plan seeks to increase strategic alignment across farm to school and farm to early care, establish clear direction for farm to kids partners, and provide momentum for farm to school movement here in our state. It also seeks to increase support for local leaders while also helping to shift responsibility for success around farm to school and early care from a reliance on individuals who are kind of going above and beyond in their community to a reliance on state level programs and structures of support. And we want to help to build and advance equity in our agricultural system and in our educational settings, from thinking about how we support emerging farmers in our state in their efforts to access institutional markets like schools and early cares, to thinking about how we help to ensure that all Minnesota kids can benefit from farm to school and early care activities in their educational settings. The development of this plan was a collaborative effort that involved many partners, agencies, and organizations. So the Minnesota Department of Agriculture organized and led the development of the plan with strong support from the Minnesota Department of Education and, again, funding support from the USDA Farm to School grant. And because of that grant, we were fortunate to be able to hire 2 great consultants from the state of Minnesota's Management Analysis and Development team to facilitate the planning process. Overall, the plan was co-developed by members of the Minnesota Farm to School Leadership Team and the Minnesota Farm to Early Care Advisory Group, with significant input from more than 350 stakeholders around the state. This is just a quick look at some of the partners who helped to create the plan. And it's important to note that it's these same partners and hopefully others who join us in the years ahead who will be co-implementing this plan moving forward. So thinking about the strategic planning process, there were 4 main phases, and in total, the planning process was about a year long. So we kicked off this effort last November by forming a design team with key partners who helped to guide the approach and activities for the strategic planning process. They also helped us to identify key stakeholders that we wanted to involve in this process, and we identified and planned specific environmental scan activities for phase 2. Phase 2 was last winter and spring, where we did a comprehensive environmental scan that included looking at recent farm to school and early care survey and grant data conducted by the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy. We researched models that are being used in other states. And most importantly, we engaged with stakeholders around the state to collect their ideas for the future of farm to school and early care in Minnesota. And we did that in a variety of ways. We hosted the Farm to School Roadshow, which was a series of regional networking events where we held visioning sessions. We, with support from partners, conducted a lot of one-on-one interviews, small group conversations, focus groups. We did presentations and facilitated large group conversations, and we did 2 public listening sessions last May and June. So some of you perhaps got to share your ideas through one of those ways. And then throughout the environmental scan process, members of the Minnesota Farm to School Leadership Team and Farm to Early Care Advisory Group met to review information as it was being collected to identify emerging themes and priorities. Phase 3 was this past summer when we took all of that data and the ideas and themes that we'd collected during the environmental scan, and we actually wrote the plan. It was an iterative process throughout which partners provided input and feedback to ensure that we ended up with a plan that we all supported and that we felt like accurately reflected the input that we'd heard throughout this process. And now we're here in phase 4 today, where we are getting to share out the plan. The plan itself has 2 parts to it. Part 1 is highlighting the shared vision and guiding principles for the Farm to Kids Alliance. And the Alliance is kind of the unification of the Minnesota Farm to School Leadership Team and the Farm to Early Care Advisory Group. And then part 2 of the plan, which is kind of the meat of the plan, is where we lay out specific priorities, goals, strategies, and actions for advancing farm to school and early care in Minnesota. And we identify specific lead and support roles for implementation. So to dive into the plan here, the vision statement for the Minnesota Farm to Kids Alliance is that the Alliance exists to unite the efforts of people supporting farm to school and early care to nourish children's bodies and minds, cultivate viable farms, and build vibrant communities in our state. We work together to support the development of relationships and infrastructure that advance the production and sustained purchase of local foods, integration of food and agriculture into teaching and learning, availability of diversified, flexible funding to advance Farm to Kids efforts, and increased public awareness and participation in Farm to Kids in Minnesota. And in case there's anyone from Vermont on today, we want to make sure to note that this vision statement was inspired by the Vermont Farm to School networks. All right, and then our guiding principles, we have 4 guiding principles that we identified. The first is silos are for farms. We're committed to working collaboratively, and we welcome diverse and intersecting identities and hold differences as a strength. Kitchens are for experimenting. We embrace new ideas with openness and curiosity while also bolstering proven strategies. All are welcome at the table. We're committed to a just, equitable food system that promotes the health of all children and benefits producers, workers, educators, and their communities. And every community matters. We honor and are guided by knowledge, experience, and expertise within Minnesota's unique communities. And we know that different environments require different approaches and strive to align resources accordingly. All right, so jumping into, again, kind of the main part of the plan, the priorities, goals, and strategies. The plan is structured around 3 main priorities that we identified that are listed here on the screen. So the first priority is increasing purchases of Minnesota grown and raised foods by schools and early care settings. The second priority is improving the integration of food and agricultural education in classrooms, cafeterias, and other educational environments. And the third priority is to build and activate a strong Farm to Kids network. For each priority, we then have identified 3 goals that you see listed here. It's probably hard to read, but we'll be talking through all of them after this slide. And then under each goal, we have specific strategies and actions that we as partners want to take to meet that goal. So now we're going to give kind of a high-level overview of what those various goals and strategies are in the plan. I will say we're just going to be scratching the surface today with the time we have. So I strongly encourage you to review the full plan afterwards if you haven't already. So starting with priority 1, which is focused on increasing local purchasing. Goal A is to further develop statewide policy and infrastructure that builds capacity for local purchasing. And 2 of the strategies for this goal were identified by partners as being high priority strategies. The first of that is to increase funding for Minnesota's Farm to School and Early Care grant programs. For those who aren't familiar with these grants, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture currently administers 2 grant programs that reimburse schools and early care centers for local food purchases. And we also this year are offering a new cost share program for family daycares for them to be reimbursed for local food purchases as well. So combined across these grants and cost share programs, the MDA will be awarding approximately $1 million in grants and cost shares this year. But the kind of purpose behind this strategy is that, many partners recognize that we've seen demand for these funding programs exceed funding for the last several years. The second high priority strategy for this goal is establishing regional coordinators to serve as place-based connectors, educators, capacity builders, and technical assistance providers. So this strategy is really getting at that support that we can be providing across the state to ensure that wherever you are in Minnesota, that there's support to help you access and succeed in Farm to Kids activities. The second goal, or goal B, for this priority is to support the development of relationships among schools, early care settings, producers, and local partners. Something we heard repeatedly through our various stakeholder engagement activities is just that there's value in state programs that create space and opportunities for producers and buyers to meet one another and start to build those relationships to work together. So the strategies identified for this goal include continuing to invest in and support the Minnesota Grown Wholesale Directory, which is a great tool that can help to build connections between producers and institutional buyers, and coordinating virtual and in-person events that support that relationship building. So one example that you see here on the screen are our regional networking events that we launched last year and was a great way for buyers and producers to make those face-to-face connections. And then finally, goal C is to expand statewide programming that builds capacity and preparedness among producers, schools, and early care providers to engage in farm to kids. And so the strategies in this goal here really focus on training and professional development. So the first is training and systems of support specifically for producers to access and succeed in wholesale markets, including schools and early care settings. And then the other strategy focuses more on the school and early care side. So expanding professional development, opportunities for school food service professionals, early care professionals, and educators to help them build knowledge and skills for purchasing and serving local foods. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Jamie, who's going to share more about our next two priorities.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kate. Again, Jamie Anderson from the Minnesota Department of Education. So priority 2 is focused on food and agricultural education. So goal A is to increase support for educational food production in schools and early care settings. So this one is really focused on school gardens or things of that nature. And so the focus of this goal is to really create really to create a community of support for educational practitioners that's really cultivating that peer-to-peer learning so they're able to access the resources that they need and feel supported to continue this work. A lot of collaborative practices and then really trying to work on growth for the educational food production models that we can find in our state. So that could be outdoor gardens, it could be raised beds. You see a picture of a hydroponic tower garden, which is becoming much more popular in schools, particularly considering Minnesota's interesting growing season. So again, a lot of discussion among partners. How can we create more of a collaborative community? The Minnesota Schoolyard Garden Coalition used to be that vehicle, but it has now sunsetted. And so thinking about what can we do to fill that gap and to make sure that there's still a support system for our educators and related to school gardens. Okay, next slide. So priority 2, goal B, is enhancing integration of farm to kids into career and technical education program frameworks. So we have heard a big request from our CTE educators that they want to also incorporate farm to school procurement in their classroom settings. And so, but they need the tools and the skills to be able to do it. So we really want to focus on providing more opportunities for professional development for our CTE educators so they can have more of a seamless integration of farm to kids and farm to school in their classrooms. And so, we conducted focus groups with our CTE educators as a part of the environmental scanning process for the strategic plan. And we really heard that they want to do it, but they don't know how. So, talking about like local procurement and what are some curriculum pieces that they can utilize seamlessly into the coursework that they're already doing. So really thinking about how we can help that group of stakeholders. Okay, goal C, expand standards-based educational resources, training, and support for food and agricultural education for early care through 12th grade. So this one is really focused on our Minnesota Harvest of the Month program. So we have created a really wonderful program for those that are not familiar with Harvest of the Month. It's basically kind of a turnkey promotional and marketing program for schools and early care sites to utilize that focuses on 15 kind of specific special crops that Minnesota can either grow or raise. So you can see a picture on the slide of our 15 food items. And basically with every food item, there comes with information and resources for the cafeteria. So you have recipes that can be standardized for school food service and then also dialed back for home use. So people can bring these recipes home and families can make them at home. There are promotional resources such as clings for the salad bars. We have big posters. There are videos that can be used in the classroom. There's newsletters and social media bites that schools can use to send home with their students. So families and other community members can become engaged with the things that they're serving in their classrooms. So, or excuse me, with the items they're serving in the cafeteria and teaching in the classroom. So again, it's a really, really great program. We have a wonderful base established, but we want to make sure that we can expand it to engage our early care settings and then also a more cultural diverse portfolio of features in the Harvest of the Month program. So thinking about, what are some different ways that other cultures utilize our Harvest of the Month crops, different recipes that feature that, maybe the stories that are significant that we can share about their culture in the classroom. And then also thinking about how we can adapt Harvest of the Month for early care. So there currently has been a pilot that has adapted several of the Harvest of the Month resources for early care settings. So we're very excited to see the results of that and to take that and then continue to build upon that pilot. So, and of course, we're thinking about funding to continue the strategy as well. All right, priority three. Primarily deals with the Farm to Kids network. And so goal A is all about establishing the Minnesota Farm to Kids Alliance to foster shared collaborative leadership among farm to school and early care partners. And so we're really thinking intentionally about how we want this new alliance structure to work within our existing farm to school leadership team and farm to early care advisory groups. So thinking about things like, membership agreement. What does it look like to be a member of this alliance? How should our meetings be designed? Should they be quarterly? Should they be monthly? How do we tie in to things that are happening just naturally throughout the course of the year and the seasons in Minnesota and the school season and early care? Thinking about leadership structure. How do we recruit new members and who should new members be? Who do we not have at the table? And then also thinking about funding for this alliance and how do we continue to spread our message and create a structure that can be set that we can then build upon to have a really strong alliance. All right, goal B is evaluate the Farm to Kids efforts to inform future work and measure impact. Evaluation truly tells the story of our work. It's a vital component of so much of the work that we all do, and it's particularly with our Farm to Kids initiative. So we really want to make sure that we have funding and capacity to advance evaluation for Farm to Kids programs and initiatives. So that might include thinking about creating a reoccurring statewide survey that we administer to K-12 or early care sites, thinking about how we can develop and implement an even more robust evaluation plan for the Minnesota Department of Agriculture's Farm to School and Early Care Grant programs. How can we tell our story with district and school and early care site highlights? So a lot of different things and a lot of different ways that we can really just truly try to tell our story through evaluation efforts. And then our last goal C under priority 3, is to increase reach and awareness of Farm to Kids through a coordinated outreach and communication. So this one is really focused on really trying to create a central location for a lot of our resources. So, what does it look like to have a central website? What does it look like to have a more formal communication plan and strategy around Farm to Kids? Wouldn't it be great if we could create and publish an annual report that could really tell our story to funders, to stakeholders? So, we could really have, just a really strong way to share the great work that we are doing. And so we know there's so many different pieces and so many different organizations that are doing amazing work in this world with Farm to School and Farm to Early Care. And so figuring out ways to unify it so we're all working towards the same goal, but in a unified way so we can be more efficient and productive with resources. Okay. Okay, so that was a lot. Again, like Kate said, scratching the surface, a lot of information that we just threw at you. But now the next question is, what's next? What are we going to be doing next, Paul? This great work that we've created. So accessing the plan. So how do I read more about the Farm to Kids plan? It's available currently on the MDA's Farm to School and Early Care webpage. There's a QR code on the slide that you can scan, or if you just do, a handy Google search, you can find it that way as well. The full strategic plan is available on the website. And then there's also a nice summary document that does a really nice job of just highlighting, again, the big picture. The plan is also available on the Farm to School Minnesota and Farm to Early Care Minnesota web pages, which are linked and on the slide right now. So those are easy ways right now to access our plan. Dissemination. So how are we sharing the message? How are we sharing this great work that we'll be working on in the next 5 years? So on the Apple Crunch Day, so October 10th, we had a big Apple Crunch celebration, and then we also had a roundtable discussion with a variety of state leaders and our partners that either helped us create this plan or are interested in doing this work. So it was a really wonderful discussion. We were at the state capitol. It was a really great event. There's been press releases that have been sharing information about the plan. And today we are doing a public webinar. And then we also have another public webinar on October 29th, which is next Tuesday from 6 to 7 o'clock in the evening. So we'll also be sharing again via partner web pages, the Minnesota Department of Education bulletin, newsletters, and et cetera. So any way, shape, or form that we can spread the word about this plan and the exciting work that will be happening. We will be presenting at different conferences and meetings throughout the state and possibly nationwide. And then thinking about, how can you help? How can our partners and network help? So kind of the same tools, same ways. So sharing within your networks, your communication channels, any way and with anyone that you feel this work could be relevant or touch. Okay, and implementation. So as alluded, it is a 5-year plan officially starting in 2025 and going to 2030. Again, it's a collaborative effort by members of our now new Farm to Kids Alliance, which currently consists of our Farm to School and Leadership Team and Farm to Early Care Advisory Group. So again, made up of state agencies, higher education, nonprofit partners, a whole host of individuals. So within the plan, there are lead and support roles for each of the strategies. So our different current members of the leadership teams and advisory groups kind of all looked at the different strategies that we've identified in the plan and kind of decided, these are areas where I could take a lead. This is area where my agency could be a support role for the different strategies that we'll be working on. And we are very excited that there will be a lot of opportunities for new partners to join in this work as well. Okay, so Kate and I, we've talked a lot, and now we really want to hear what you all have to say. So we would love for you to share any thoughts that you have, any questions, any wonderings about the plan. Feel free to come off mute if you would like. You can raise your hand and we will call on you virtually. Or if you want to type a message in the chat, that is completely fine too. So just kind of general questions. So what wonderings have come to the surface related to the Farm to Kids priority work that we identified throughout the course of our strategic planning process? Are there any components of the plan that are especially exciting or intriguing to you? And maybe the work that you are currently doing or that you're hoping to do? Those are just kind of the two big overarching questions. So I will pause so others can hop in.
It always takes a brave soul to be the first person to ask a question or share a comment.
I'll share a comment. This is Sarah Elliott. I'm with USDA, the Midwest Farm to School Regional Specialist, and I am thrilled at all the work that you have put together, and just struck by how comprehensive this plan is. And another piece that hit me was how much ECE farm to ECE work has come to the surface, I guess, in the last year or so, and we're seeing it in other states as well. But I really appreciate the emphasis that Minnesota is putting on it, and I can't wait to see you all get going on it. Thank you, Kate and Jamie.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And we'll just note Sarah with USDA as part of the wonderful office that administers the grant that funded this program too. So a major thanks for the grant funds we received to do this, because it wouldn't have been possible without that support. And yes, I do think this process has, I think, been really wonderful for us to really be intentional about thinking, what does it look like to build stronger connection between farm to school and farm to early care? Because there's been so much great development in both kind of spheres over the last decade in our state, and wanting to continue to lift up both of that and think about how we bring them together even more. All right, I see that there's someone mentioned in the chat. I'm running a new program that aligns perfectly for this programming with a Mankato nonprofit, Living Earth Center. How do nonprofits get involved? Are there one-on-one meetings I can schedule to get connected with all the possible resources? I would say this is exciting to hear, Cora. And as Jamie mentioned, for the kind of Farm to Kids Alliance like structure itself, this is something we're thinking about right now, is how do we engage new kind of like members or partners into that kind of more formalized structure. But I would say in general, yes, we want to have anyone and everyone who's interested in being a part of this get involved. And so I think a first great step would just be to reach out to myself and Jamie, and we'd love to connect more to hear about the work that your nonprofit's doing, and think about where there might be opportunities to collaborate together. And I'd extend that invitation to others as well. If you're feeling excited or seeing opportunities for alignment, we would love to have a conversation. And I will just say we have our contact information right here, if you want to jot it down. And we'll also be sending out an email after this with access to the strategic plan and summary and the recording. And we'll be sure to have my information as well as Jamie's in that as well. Other questions or comments that folks have?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Janine Bowman from the Morris Area Schools, and I do a lot of the farm to school, and anybody that knows me knows I'm very passionate about it. And I'm very thankful of all the opportunities that this will bring to not only schools, but like you said, the daycares and the preschools. I see within my own school, our preschool program wanting to become involved. I see specific grades, adopting the farm to school. That's what they do all of their field trips with. And I just like the fact that there's more resources now than there were 10, 15 years ago when I really got into it. And I love the fact that more people are interested, and it is becoming a bigger movement, because I think we need to. People need to know where their food comes from. They need to understand that. And they need to know how to grow it themselves if they want. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Janine. And we'll say, for anyone who doesn't know Janine on this call, Janine runs an incredible farm to school program in Morris, Minnesota. So thanks, Janine. And yeah, I think we mentioned this early on, that one of the goals of this plan is to help kind of shift that responsibility for success in farm to school and early care from those individual kind of champions, including Janine, right, to having more resources and systems of support so that everyone can be involved in this work. And so we're excited to continue to dig into that work and also continue to learn from champions like you, Janine, who are doing the work in your own community.
There's a lot of momentum in farm to school and early care right now. So it's a really, really amazing opportunity and time to be involved, to be doing the work, and then continue growing. So it's exciting.
Any other final questions or thoughts? We know that we threw a lot out there at you today, but hopefully it's good food for thought, and we've given you some things to think about or reflect on in connection with your own work or your own areas of interest. So if there aren't any further questions or comments, again, please feel free to reach out if you want to connect more. We'd love to stay in touch. And we really appreciate you all joining this afternoon to hear about this plan. And hopefully you feel like you have a little bit of a more clear understanding of what's in it and where we go from here.